Because so much is happening to us and you kind of just lose it all, and it's great just to sit back and just watch it back and kind of remember and like relive those moments.
Before they became the most famous band of the decade, they were just 5 teenagers with a dream. Before they filled stadiums, before their names became legends.
Kind of lucky, like our fans are universal, like in their craziness, and they're all kind of similar, even though they are from, different parts of the world.
Harry, Liam, Niall, Lewis, and Zayn were just boys singing in their bedrooms, dreaming of the stage, of the spotlight, of being heard. Harry Styles, an ordinary guy from Holmes Chapel, a small town where everyone knows everyone. In the mornings, he kneaded dough at a bakery, and in the evenings, he sang with his school band, White Eskimo. His voice was a bit rough back then, but there was already something special about it. When his friends went out, Harry stayed in the rehearsal room, singing until he went hoarse. His mother recalled, he didn't dream of fame. He just couldn't not sing. One day he realized it's now or never. Either he tries, or he'll regret it for the rest of his life. That's when he applied for the X Factor. Across the country, in Wolverhampton, Liam Payne started every morning with a run. He was disciplined, determined, sometimes too serious for his age. He dreamed of being a singer but knew the road would be hard. He had already auditioned for the X Factor in 2008 and Simon Cowell told him, "You're not ready yet." It was a blow. But Liam didn't give up. He came back stronger. He trained, practiced vocals, prepared like an athlete before a fight. He wanted to prove not just to Simon, but to himself that he was ready. In Ireland, where it rains more often than the sun shines, Niall Horan sang on the streets. People in the local pub knew him, the boy with a guitar who covered Ed Sheeran songs. He had no team, no producer, just a dream and a guitar. People told him, "You're too young," but he didn't listen. He smiled and kept singing. When he heard the X Factor was holding auditions in Dublin, he told his friends, "I'm going. Why not try?" No one knew that this boy with the Irish accent would soon become part of the loudest pop phenomenon of the decade. Louis Tomlinson was impossible to miss. Charismatic, funny, confident, he loved the stage, loved the spotlight, but was always slightly in the background. He acted in school plays, sang in choirs, and dreamed of more. When he told his friends he wanted to audition for the X Factor, they laughed. But Louis wasn't the kind to back down. "I'll prove it," he said, and went. Zayn Malik was the opposite of Louis, quiet, reserved, dreamy. He drew, wrote lyrics, listened to R&B. His mother recalled, he always sang, but he hated being watched. He doubted if he should even go to the audition. But on the day, his mother literally pulled him out of the house. "Just try," she told him. "You never know what might happen." And he tried, and it changed everything. 5 stories, 5 different cities. None of them could imagine that their paths were already intertwined. Behind the scenes of the X Factor, fate was arranging the pieces on the board. Within hours, these 5 boys would meet for the first time. They didn't know they would become brothers, that they would change pop music, that they would make history. They just wanted to sing. The X Factor 2010, London. It was an ordinary audition, one of hundreds. But in that building, on a summer day in 2010, something extraordinary happened. A coincidence that would change the history of pop music. Harry Styles walked in first. Polite, a bit shy, but his smile was impossible to fake. He sang "Isn't She Lovely" by Stevie Wonder. It worked. People smiled. Simon Cowell nodded. Harry had something you can't explain. But Harry wasn't the only one. Later that same day, Liam Payne stepped onto the stage confident, composed. He'd been here before. His voice was powerful, clear. The judges exchanged glances. Simon smiled. "Now you're ready," he said. One by one, they passed their auditions, each talented in their own way, but too ordinary for solo success. No one knew that in their imperfection lay the secret. When the auditions ended, the judges realized something was missing. Among hundreds of contestants, there were 5 who didn't quite fit as solo artists, but together they could be something more. Nicole Scherzinger. What if we put them together? Simon. Are you serious? Nicole. Yes. These guys could be a group. Look at them. They're all different, and that's their strength. Each one has a voice, a story, a spark. Together, they could create something the world has never seen. Simon leaned back, silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. The room went quiet. The judges exchanged glances as if realizing they'd just changed the course of music history. And so, almost by accident, the idea was born, one that would change everything. From a simple decision on a TV show, began a new chapter in music. Backstage, assistants called the contestants by name. Harry, Niall, Liam, Lewis, and Zayn walked into a small room that smelled of coffee and nerves. They stood there, not knowing why they'd been called. Awkward glances, nervous laughter, silence. 5 strangers, 5 personalities, 1 chance. They didn't even know each other's names yet. They just stood, waiting for someone to explain. And then, Harry, still unsure what was happening, smiled and said quietly, "Well, looks like we're a band now." The others laughed. The tension broke. And in that moment, something clicked, a spark, an unspoken connection. It felt right. They started talking, joking, sharing stories. Louis instantly took the role of the Joker. Zayn smiled but stayed quiet. Niall pulled out his guitar and suggested they sing. Liam nodded, and suddenly, the room filled with music. Rough, imperfect, but alive. 5 voices from 5 different worlds blending into one. A producer standing in the corner listened silently, then turned to his assistant and whispered, "That's it. That's the sound." From that day on, they began rehearsing together. They had only a few hours to choose a song and prepare for the next stage. They had no experience as a group, no plan, but already they had chemistry. That rare, inexplicable thing that can't be taught or forced. Those first rehearsals were chaos. Everyone wanted to lead. No one knew who sang what, who took the chorus. They argued, laughed, got lost, but the more they sang, the clearer it became. It worked. They fit together like puzzle pieces that had always belonged. That evening, they stayed long after everyone else had gone home, talking, sharing stories, dreaming. Harry said he just wanted to make music. Niall admitted he still couldn't believe he'd made it through. Liam said this was his second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. Lewis declared loudly, "We're going to do something big. I can feel it." Zayn smiled and murmured, "Let's just not screw it up." They all laughed. It was their first night as a band the night One Direction was born. They had no idea what awaited them. Millions of fans, world tours, chaos, fame. Back then, all they had was each other, a small room, and a song that had only just begun to play. Night fell over the X Factor camp. The stage lights dimmed, the hall was empty. But somewhere in the corner, 5 boys were still rehearsing. Their voices echoed softly through the walls. They missed notes, laughed, started again. But in that imperfection, there was something real, the spark that would one day be called the magic of One Direction. The next morning, they were up before everyone else. Harry brought coffee, Niall tuned his guitar, Louis cracked jokes, Zayn stayed silent, and Liam tried to keep them focused. They were told they had only a few hours before their performance. Nobody believed they'd make it. But as so often happens, impossibility gives birth to miracles. When they walked on stage for the first time as a group, the room went still. The judges sat with folded arms, not expecting much. The music began hesitant at first. Then Liam looked up. Harry joined the chorus. Niall added harmony, and suddenly everything fell into place. 5 voices, 5 hearts, 1 sound. The beginning of everything. The audience felt it instantly. Smiles, applause, the first screams. On the judges' faces, surprise. Simon looked at Nicole, and she simply said, "Told you so." After the performance, they were sent backstage. They were excited, almost unable to believe it had gone so well. Harry was jumping with joy. Lewis shouted, "We did it!" And Liam smiled for the first time that day. Zayn, usually reserved, quietly said, "That was bloody amazing." That night, they were first called the Boys with a Future. Journalists began writing short notes. Fans started hunting for videos. Producers exchanged intrigued looks. But no one yet realized this wasn't just a new band. This was the beginning of a new era. With every performance, they grew more confident. Rehearsals turned into improvisation, jokes into friendship, friendship into unity. They were no longer 5 contestants on a show, they had become something more, a team. One night, after another live performance, Liam looked at the others and said, "We have to keep going. No looking back." And Harry replied, "One direction, one way." From that moment, those words became more than just a name, they became a promise to themselves and to the millions who would soon know their voices. They had no idea that within months they would top the UK charts, that fans would scream their names across the world, that this day was just the first step in a story that would change them forever. Right after the X Factor finale, the studio fell silent. The cameras turned off, the lights dimmed, the audience left. But backstage, in a small room, 5 boys sat on the floor, unable to believe it was over. They had placed third, and yet none of them looked disappointed. Harry said softly, "I don't think this is the end." Liam nodded. "No, this is just the beginning." A few days later, the phone rang. It was Simon Cowell. His voice was calm, but every word hit like thunder. "Boys, I want to sign you. We're going to make you a real band." Those words changed everything. Almost immediately, rehearsals, photo shoots, meetings began. Their days turned into a whirlwind of movement and noise. Yesterday, they were just contestants. Today, they were signed to Britain's biggest label. They filmed their first promo videos, wrote songs, learned how to act in front of the camera. No one knew how to be a star, but they all felt that something huge was happening. The first weeks were madness. Their fans, mostly teenagers who followed the X Factor, began uniting online. Fan pages appeared, memes, edits, thousands of comments with the same message, "I love One Direction." It was the birth of a new phenomenon, the digital fan culture. The internet became the weapon that would blow up the world around them. When their first single, "What Makes You Beautiful," came out, everything changed. Radio stations played it every hour. YouTube overflowed with views. The song became an anthem of a generation. It was bright, sunny, innocent, just like One Direction themselves. People recognized their faces, mimicked their moves, bought posters, sang in the streets. Day by day, the hysteria grew. Posters with their faces hung in classrooms everywhere. Fangirls organized flash mobs, wrote letters, cried at concerts. Airports turned into chaos, streets into crowds. What began as a TV project became a cultural phenomenon. But with fame came pressure. Cameras followed them everywhere. No morning, no night belonged to them anymore. Zayn later said, "We couldn't just go out for coffee. We weren't people anymore. We were One Direction." Yet inside the group, the energy was still alive. They felt the rush, the drive, as if anything was possible. Liam said, "Every day feels like an explosion. We can't even process it, but it's amazing." Harry added, "I just don't want it to end." London, Paris, New York, every city greeted them the same. Screams, lights, flags, chaos. They gave dozens of interviews, appeared on morning shows, slept 3 hours a night. Around them formed an empire, stylists, managers, security, PR. Everything grew at a dizzying pace. But most importantly, they were still friends. After filming, after interviews, they still sat together, joked, argued, created. Louis lifted the mood, Niall brought his guitar, Zayn sketched quietly, Liam managed the schedule, and Harry just watched, smiling. Amid all the chaos, there was still room for those simple moments, as if deep down, they were still the same boys from small towns. And when they finally stepped onto the stage of their first headlining tour, thousands screamed, unable to hear themselves. Lights, smoke, waves of sound, and hands reaching out. They stood there, blinded by spotlights, realizing this was their life now. One Direction had become more than a band. They were a symbol of youth, freedom, and the courage to dream. One night, returning from a concert, Harry said quietly, "You know, we started all this just for the music. And now, we're history." No one replied. They just stared out the bus window, where the city lights flickered by, and somewhere in someone's headphones, "What Makes You Beautiful" played softly. They didn't yet know that ahead of them lay even bigger stages, millions of records sold, and the first cracks in their glittering fairy tale. Their first world tour was madness. Backstage chaos, shouting, flashes. Outside hotel windows, screaming fans all night long. Inside arenas, the roar of stadiums, the thunder of thousands of voices. They smiled, waved, sang, jumped, did everything expected of them. But inside, things began to shift. Harry once said, "You stand on stage in front of 20,000 people and feel like you're not really there, like you're watching yourself from somewhere far away." That feeling grew stronger with time. The stage had become both their home and their cage. Days blurred together flights, interviews, rehearsals, concerts, shoots, little sleep, endless noise. They were just teenagers who had suddenly become a corporation. And the corporation demanded that the show never stop. Liam admitted in an interview, "We lived on a schedule that didn't belong to us. We could be in 3 countries in one day and not remember where we woke up." Niall put it simply, "We just worked and sang and worked again." The first signs of exhaustion began to show. The laughter was still there, but shorter now. Harry joked less. Louis got irritated faster. Zayn withdrew into himself. He never liked crowds, and now they terrified him. On stage, he was an artist. Off stage, a shadow. Fan love turned into pressure. Millions of eyes followed every move. Millions of comments analyzed every word. Their lives were no longer their own. "We didn't belong to ourselves," Liam recalled later. "Even our silence became a headline." The industry spun them like cogs in a giant machine. Contracts, producers, brands, record-breaking sales. But the higher they climbed, the emptier it felt inside. On the outside, shine. On the inside, fatigue. One night after a show in South America, they sat in the dressing room, and a heavy silence settled between them. Louis asked, "Guys, are you actually happy?" No one answered at first. Harry stared at the floor. Zayn simply walked out. It was the first time they all understood something was wrong. Music videos, photo shoots, tours, everything kept moving as if nothing was happening. But inside the group, tension was building. Not anger, not envy, just the fatigue of always being One Direction. Each of them longed, if only for a second, to go home, to feel quiet, to feel ordinary. But their names already belonged to millions. The press wrote about the band's unshakable harmony. Fans praised their friendship forever. But the truth was different. Backstage, friendship was rarer, conversations shorter, smiles tighter. Sometimes they argued, sometimes they said nothing at all. And yet, when the music began, everything else vanished. The moment the first chords of Story of My Life or Little Things rang out, they were those 5 boys in that X Factor room again. On stage, they were one. Off stage, each fought his own demon. Zayn with anxiety and pressure. Liam with the weight of responsibility he'd placed on himself. Louis with the feeling of losing control. Niall with the effort to stay positive while everyone around him burned out. Harry with the kind of silence that only arrives at night, when the lights go out and you're left alone. Their life became a whirlwind, beautiful, bright, and merciless. Every day a new city, new screams, new smiles. Every evening the same song. And each time, one question echoed inside. How long can this last? No one dared say it out loud, because they were still One Direction. And as long as the fans believed, they had to keep going. The world around them already belonged to one direction. Arenas, billboards, stadiums, hundreds of millions of views, hundreds of millions of hearts. They had become the voice of a generation. But inside, they were changing. Years of touring had made them older. Their faces were no longer those of the teenagers from the X Factor auditions. They were men who had seen too much. Harry said, "You start to understand you can't be a boy forever, but the world still wants you to be." Liam assumed the role of the eldest, keeping everything in line from performances to tour discipline. He felt responsible for their success. Louis joked less and felt quiet more often. Niall still tried to carry the lightness, but even that became a shield. And Zayn drifted further away. He smiled for the camera less and less, skipped late-night hangs more and more. Interviews were hard. The crowds didn't thrill him, they made him anxious. Sometimes he disappeared for hours, walking alone without security. "I didn't feel like I was part of it," he would say later. "I felt like I was suffocating." Cracks began to appear within the band. Fatigue, burnout, different ideas of what their music should be. Each wanted creative freedom, but the contract demanded new hits, new albums, new tours. They were prisoners of their own success. During the Take Me Home tour, they began writing more themselves. It became their way of saying what they couldn't say out loud. The lyrics filled with home, loneliness, fear. On the outside, bright smiles. On the inside, anxiety with nowhere to go. With Midnight Memories, it became obvious. They had grown up. Guitars got louder, lyrics deeper, the covers darker. They were no longer the Beach Boys, as the press had painted them. They were men trying to find themselves inside a machine without brakes. And then everything changed. Spring 2015, a world tour, crowds, flashes, a dozen cameras. At one show, Zayn didn't look like himself, tired, distant, without that usual spark. A few days later, he suddenly left the tour, citing stress and exhaustion. The press exploded rumors, accusations, speculation. A week later came the statement, "Zayn Malik is leaving One Direction." The world froze. Millions of fans cried. Twitter crashed. For many, it felt like the end of an era. For the band, it was shock and emptiness. Liam said, "We knew he wasn't happy, but we hoped he'd stay." Louis later admitted, "I was angry. It felt like he'd left us. But then I understood he just wanted to be free." Harry, in an interview, said only, "I understand him." After Zayn left, everything shifted. The remaining four continued the tour, but the stage sounded different. Every song was a reminder of what was gone. They kept singing "Story of My Life," and thousands of voices took up the words, but this time, those voices carried sorrow. Zayn began his solo career. The others tried to hold together what was left. Louis kept everyone close. Liam stayed professional. Harry disappeared deeper into the music. Niall into his guitar and calm. They still loved music, but now every note held a shade of loss. And still, they didn't stop. They decided to make one more album, a final step together. After Zayn's departure, the stage felt larger, but the space was filled with absence. The first shows without him were heavy. Fans cried, and sometimes the boys did too. They kept singing because they couldn't do otherwise, because music was all they had left. Backstage, Harry said quietly, "If we stop now, we'll fall apart. So we have to keep going." And they did. 4 voices instead of 5. 4 gazes. 4 different ways of carrying the pain. But every concert felt like a farewell. They knew now this wouldn't last forever. They went into the studio to make a record that wouldn't be just another release, but a summation of their entire story. And so Made in the A.M. was born, their most mature, most honest album. The naivety of the early years was gone. The glitter and youthful frenzy were gone too. What remained was grown-up music, tinged with sadness. In every song, goodbye. In every line, memory. If I Could Fly sounded like a letter that was never sent. Love You Goodbye, like a confession spoken too late. And history. like the final chapter they wrote together. When they recorded History, the studio was silent. After the last chord, no one said a word. Harry just nodded, Louis smiled, Liam wiped his eyes, and Niall laughed softly to hide his emotion. They all knew this was the end. The last concerts passed as if in a haze. Thousands of people, screams, lights, but it all sounded different now. They weren't chasing fame anymore, they just wanted to say goodbye. At the final show, Liam took the microphone and said, "Thank you for being with us. Thank you for believing. Without you, we wouldn't exist." Fans cried. The glow of phone lights filled the arena like a sea of stars. And when History began to play, everyone sang together. Harry's voice trembled. Louis looked into the crowd. Niall smiled, and Liam quietly whispered the words, "This is not the end." But it was the end. Not loud, not dramatic, simply human. After the tour, each went his own way. Harry flew to Los Angeles to write music and find a new sound. Liam went into production, experimenting with genres. Niall returned to Ireland, rested, played guitar, and began his first solo album. Louis went through a dark time loss, fatigue, but never stopped creating. They never announced a breakup. They said it was a pause, but everyone knew a pause can last forever. And yet, a connection remained. Whenever one of them released a song, the others congratulated him. Whenever someone mentioned the past, they all smiled. One Direction never really disappeared. They simply stopped being a band and became a story. In one interview, Harry said, "We never said goodbye. We just grew up." And maybe that's why their music still lives on, because it was real. Because it grew up alongside those who listened to it. Final shot archival footage. 5 boys stand in a line, arms around each other, waving to the crowd. A quiet voice behind the scenes says softly, "They began as 5 boys who just wanted to sing, and became a legend no one will ever forget." History plays until the end. The camera pulls back. The stage lights fade. On the screen appears one last line. One Direction. Infinity. Harry Styles. When the tour ended, Harry was left alone with silence. For the first time in 5 years, there were no screams, no schedules, no cameras. He would wake up and not know where to go. The silence that first frightened him soon became freedom. He moved to Los Angeles, rented a small house in the hills, bought an old vinyl player and a guitar he hadn't touched during the tours, and he began to write without pressure, without deadlines. Just write. About himself, about love, about fear, about growing up. The world had known Harry Styles as the smiling idol with perfect hair. But that Harry was gone. In his place appeared someone else quiet, thoughtful, deep. He no longer sought approval. He sought meaning. When his debut solo album was released in 2017, the world heard music no one expected. Not pop hits, not dance tracks, but art, rock, soul, psychedelia, lyrics full of vulnerability. Sign of the Times became a revelation. Just stop your crying, it's a sign of the times. Those words sounded like a manifesto. Harry wasn't just singing, he was feeling. And for the first time in years, he was truly himself. He no longer hid behind an image. He allowed himself to be everything gentle, bold, eccentric. His fashion became his philosophy style as freedom, not performance. He wore suits, dresses, pearls, feathers not to shock, but to show that masculinity can be soft and strength can live in honesty. Critics expected him to fail, but the opposite happened. Harry Styles became the new face of music. His concerts aren't just shows. They're safe spaces where people come to feel free, to be themselves. From the stage, he often says, "Be kind, be free, be whoever you are." These words became his creed. He stopped being a product of the industry, he became an artist. In time, Harry went beyond music. He acted in Dunkirk, Don't Worry Darling, My Policeman. But even in Hollywood, he remained himself calm, mysterious, living by his own rhythm. He never chased attention, and that's why he became iconic. Now, his concerts aren't just filled with One Direction fans. They're filled with a generation that grew up with him. People who, like Harry, are still learning how to find themselves in a world that moves too fast. Harry says, "Sometimes to find yourself, you have to disappear and then come back different." And he did come back. Today, Harry Styles isn't just a former boy band member. He's proof that you can grow out of fame without losing your soul. His story is about music, silence, and truth. "We've all changed," he once said, "but what we did together will always be part of me." Liam Payne. Liam Payne had always seemed like the one who kept everything under control. While the others laughed and let go, he made sure things ran smoothly, disciplined, focused, sometimes too serious for a pop star. But that same sense of duty became his burden. He was the one who never let himself fall, and yet, in the end, he was the one who broke. After One Direction, Liam struggled to understand who he was. All his youth had been spent inside something enormous. A whirlwind of schedules, people, lights, and screams. And then silence. Liam didn't know how to live in silence. He tried to fill it with music, parties, studios, interviews. His first solo album came out in 2019, and listeners heard not just pop, but something darker, heavier, filled with exhaustion. His voice carried less confidence, more doubt. He said he could finally sing the way he wanted, but behind that freedom hid loneliness. He often admitted he didn't know who he was without the band. He tried to be the person people expected strong, confident, the leader, but inside he'd been breaking for a long time. He looked for himself in relationships, in family, in music, but nothing gave him peace. The fatigue grew year by year. Problems with sleep, alcohol, motivation. He didn't hide it. Sometimes he even spoke about it openly, as if wanting someone to hear his quiet cry for help. People see the smile, he said, but they don't see what's behind it. And yet, despite the darkness, Liam kept creating. In 2024, he released Teardrops, and for the first time in years, his voice sounded alive again. It wasn't just a song. It was a confession. A farewell, maybe, or a quiet promise that he was still searching for light, even in the dark. That autumn, Liam left for South America. He said he wanted to change the air, reset, feel free. He posted short videos, shared smiling photos, kept saying everything was under control. But, as so often happens, the warmest pictures turn out to be the last. On the 16th of October, 2024, he died in Buenos Aires. He was in his hotel late at night and, according to official reports, fell from the balcony. He was only 31. The world froze. Fans refused to believe it. The internet filled with photos, songs, candles, letters. No one wanted to accept that the one who had always tried to be strong was gone so suddenly and so alone. The investigation ruled it an accident. He lost balance, possibly from exhaustion and alcohol. There were no signs of suicide, but the world still asked why. How could someone who had everything not escape himself? His death was a shock, not only for fans, but for everyone who had known him personally. Liam left behind a son, his songs, and the memory of a man who took too many hits for too long. He wasn't the loudest, or the flashiest, or the most controversial. He was the heart of discipline, the voice of reason, the one who tried to hold everyone together. But perhaps that's what broke him. In a world where everyone wants to be a hero, Liam was simply human, honest, vulnerable, alive. His life ended too soon, but it left a mark in music, in the voices of fans, in the hearts of those who once sang his songs. Liam Payne was the shadow of a leader, but that shadow glowed from within. And now, in his absence, the silence feels even louder. After the band's breakup, Niall Horan didn't vanish. He didn't chase fame or try to prove he could be the new One Direction. He simply went his own way quietly, without big statements. He had always been that way, real, grounded, genuine. While others searched for themselves in noise and excess, Niall chose calm and music. He went home to Ireland. For several months, he gave no interviews, made no public appearances. He just lived, walked the same streets he had as a teenager. visited old friends, listened to the rain, played his guitar, and when he began writing again, his music sounded like breathing. His songs held no pain, no drama, only sincerity and life. In 2017, he released his debut solo album, Flicker. It wasn't an attempt to repeat the band's success. It was a love letter to simplicity, to acoustic sound, to voice, to light. This Town and Slow Hands felt like conversations with himself. There was no performative sadness, only honesty and nostalgia. Niall seemed to be telling his listeners, yes, everything has changed, but that's not bad. That's just life. He didn't chase radio hits or scandals. He just stayed true to himself. Even his stage image, simple, unpolished, unpretentious, felt like a reminder that sometimes strength lies in normalcy. In a world where everyone tries to be someone special, Niall simply stayed himself. He traveled, wrote, played, smiled. At concerts, he always talked to the audience, told stories, joked. There was no hysteria, only warmth. People didn't come to scream. They came to listen. He created a space where everyone felt at home. During the pandemic, he recorded songs alone, sitting in a dim room with just a lamp and his guitar. He said he wanted to bring people a sense of calm again. His second album, Heartbreak Weather, came out in 2020, more mature, but still soft. Niall's music felt like the opposite of the industry's noise. There was room in it for silence, melancholy, and life. He never tried to be a philosopher or make bold statements. He just lived honestly and quietly. In interviews, he often said, "I don't want to be a legend. I just want to be happy." And it seemed he succeeded. When Liam died, Niall was one of the first to speak publicly. His words were short, but they carried everything. He was kind, and I'll always remember him that way. After that, he disappeared from social media for weeks, returned to Ireland, and stayed out of sight. In a rare later interview, he said, "Sometimes the hardest thing is just to keep going." But he would want us to. Over the years, Niall became an example that you can be famous and still not lose yourself. His music, his smile, his sincerity made him something more than an artist. He became a symbol of kindness, authenticity, and inner peace. He didn't try to change the world. He just reminded everyone that even in the noise, you can remain a light. In the final scene, he's on stage laughing, thanking the audience. The camera slowly pulls back as the lights fade, and his voice is heard. "I'm happy we were part of that story, and if I had the chance, I'd do it all again." His music remains the same, warm, kind, real, a heart that never hardened, a man who never lost himself. Niall Horan, the one who kept the light. Louis Tomlinson was always the soul of One Direction. He was the one who joked, encouraged, and made the group feel like a family, even when everything around was falling apart. But behind his laughter was someone who had been fighting all his life, quietly, without complaint, without asking for pity. After the breakup, he didn't fade away or chase fame. He simply tried to understand what came next. From the beginning, Louis wasn't seen as the band's center. He didn't sing the loudest parts, wasn't the face of the brand. But within the group, he was the glue that held everyone together. Harry once called him the Bond. The irony is that after the breakup, it was Louis who had to hold himself together. In 2016, while preparing his first solo track, tragedy struck his mother. Johanna passed away from cancer. She had been the one who always believed in him, who supported him when the world turned away. Louis didn't cancel his performance. Just days after the funeral, he took the stage at the X Factor and sang "Just Hold On." He could barely stand. His voice trembled, but he didn't break. He just sang. It wasn't just a performance, it was a farewell. The song became a hit, but Louis later said it wasn't about success, it was survival. After that, he withdrew from the spotlight, stopped giving interviews, stopped being seen. He grieved in silence. But fate didn't give him time to heal. 3 years later, in 2019, his younger sister, Félicité, died of an overdose. She was only 18. It was the second blow, one that would have broken most people. But Lewis didn't give up. He recorded Walls quiet, raw, almost confessional. No radio hits, just pain, love, and memory. Two of Us became the most personal song of his career. He sang, "You'll never know how much I miss you. The day that they took you, I wish it was me instead." It was a song written by a son, a brother, a man who had learned loss too early. But within that pain was incredible strength. Louis didn't drown in it, he transformed it into meaning. He began to speak openly about depression, loss, resilience. "We've all lost someone," he said. "And if my story helps even one person, then it's worth it." His concerts became something different, not spectacles, but gatherings filled with human warmth. He talked to the audience, looked them in the eyes, spoke about what others were afraid to say: fear, grief, hope. He didn't act, he just was. After Liam's death, Louis stayed silent for days. When he finally spoke, he wrote, "He was my brother, and it hurts, deeply." No long posts, no grand words. He simply went to the cemetery, placed a white rose, and left. Louis Tomlinson is a man whom life kept breaking, and yet he never let it win. He didn't hide, didn't run, didn't pretend. He just kept walking, carrying everything life had given him. His music became a quiet manifesto for those who refused to give up. He may not have been the most popular, but perhaps he was the most real. He once said, "I don't need a perfect life, I need a real one." And maybe that's the truest thing about him. A man who turned pain into strength and loss into purpose. Final scene. He stands on stage. Soft light surrounds him. The crowd sings Two of Us with him. The camera moves closer, and we see him smiling, not sadly, not pretending, but truly, peacefully. "If my mom and sister could see this," he once said, "I think they'd be proud." Louis Tomlinson is a story of resilience, of a heart that can be shattered and still keep beating. When One Direction split, Zayn Malik was already living in another world. His departure was the first loud signal that not everything had been as perfect as it seemed. In 2015, he said a simple line, "I want to be a normal two-year-old." Perhaps it was a cry no one really heard. After leaving, he almost disappeared. He moved to Los Angeles, changed his number, stopped giving interviews. People said he wanted silence. And for the first time in years, he really was alone. No schedule, no cameras, no one telling him what to sing or wear. But freedom didn't bring relief. It brought emptiness. He wrote at night, slept by day, rarely went out. His debut album, Mind of Mine, became a manifesto of solitude. Zayn wasn't trying to please radio. He simply poured out everything that had built up. Eastern inflections, sensual R&B, lyrics full of doubt, tenderness, fear, and love. Pillow Talk was a hit, and even there you could hear it not joy, but a storm within. Zayn was always different. In the band, he was the quietest, the most guarded. He didn't like cameras, crowds, or pretense. Those close to him would say he felt things more deeply than the others. Maybe that's why show business was too loud for him. He often said he didn't know how to live on display. After the first years of his solo career, he retreated further into the shadows. He stopped touring, canceled shows, blaming anxiety. People online criticized him, misunderstanding that it wasn't petulance, it was real pain. He was fighting himself. Anxiety, depression, insomnia. Years later, he summed it up in one sentence. "I didn't want to feel like a product. I wanted to feel human." That line is the essence of everything he went through. He lived in New York, then moved back to England. He wrote, drew, designed, recorded tracks at home, and sometimes released them suddenly, without promo. His music became intimate, like a diary. Nobody Is Listening 2021 sounded like a quiet confession of love and exhaustion at once. No big choruses, just truth. There were plenty of headlines: his relationship with Gigi Hadid, the birth of their daughter Kai, breakups, scandals. Strip all that away and a different picture remains. a man seeking peace. His place in Pennsylvania became a refuge where he could drop the mask. He raised his daughter, walked in the woods, fed the horses, and in those simple things, it seemed, he found what he could never find on stage. Zayn became an artist of his inner world. "I don't need a crowd," he said. "I need the truth." His music, his paintings, his silences, all parts of a person who once stood before millions and sang, yet felt entirely alone. When Liam died, Zayn didn't issue a statement. No posts. Weeks later, he went live and said quietly, "He was part of my life, and that won't change." It was enough. Over time, Zayn became a symbol of the other side of fame where there is no light, but there is depth. He wasn't perfect. He was alive. A man who paid for freedom with loneliness and still chose the truth. "I don't want to be a hero," he said once. "I just want to be myself." Final images. Evening. Zayn sits in a half-lit room, a guitar by the wall, rain at the window. The camera moves in. He smiles, and for a second, it seems he's finally at peace with himself. When One Direction began, they were just boys with guitars and a dream. Very quickly, they became part of something far larger, a machine that never stopped, earning millions every day. That machine had a name: the industry. After the X Factor, Simon Cowell offered them a contract with Psycho Music. On paper, every artist's dream: tours, recording, producers, money. Behind that thin sheet of paper lay a different reality. Rights to songs, image, performances, even public statements, all controlled. They belonged to the system. They didn't choose what to sing, how to dress, what to say on stage. Everything was part of a marketing plan. Smiles, gestures, sound bites, a script written in advance. Harry once said in an interview, "At first we thought it was just fun. Then we realized we were being programmed." Managers watched every step. PR teams vetted posts, relationships, even facial expressions. If someone looked too tired, the photo was banned. If someone acted too much like himself, he got a talk. They weren't people, they were a brand. And that brand sold worldwide. Tickets, merch, fragrances, clothes, books, films. One Direction became an economy of hundreds of millions. In 2014 alone, their world tours brought in over $200 million. How much of that reached them? No one can say for sure. The split wasn't equal. The lion's share went to producers, management, labels. They worked 16 hours a day, 3 countries in one day, dozens of meetings, shoots, signings, no breaks. Ask for rest, and here, you can't. You're at your peak. Liam later recalled, "We didn't belong to ourselves. We belonged to success." That's when the first cracks appeared, not from fights, but from fatigue. The system wrung them dry. When Zayn left, panic erupted backstage, not only emotional, but financial. Losing one member meant losing millions. Marketers recalculated. Managers demanded they go on. "We have to protect the brand," they said. No one asked, "Do you want to?" There were other hidden sides. They were handed safe topics, safe answers, forbidden from discussing religion, politics, relationships, anything that could dent the perfect boy's image. Even personal tragedies had to be swallowed. Sometimes they pushed back. Louis clashed with management. Harry quietly refused certain decisions. Zayn went silent. But the machine was stronger. Any protest was labeled unprofessional. Offstage, they were ordinary young men. Inside the industry, they were products. Their faces printed on everything from notebooks to credit cards. Every step was monetized. They were part of pop's golden era, but behind the glitter was exploitation. Contracts auto-renewed, calendars filled with no days off. If someone fell ill, the show went on just with less energy. The machine could not stop. Zayn once said, "We were like robots, doing what we had to, not what we wanted." In that line lies the truth of their reality. Fans saw 5 smiling faces. Behind the curtain were exhaustion, tears, and the feeling that freedom lived far away. End a tour? No rest, straight into making the next album. release the album, a new tour begins. No pauses, no life. By the time of the 2016 hiatus, each of them was at the edge. Harry told a producer, "If we don't stop now, there'll be nothing left of us." And he was right. One Direction became not just a band, but a mirror showing how the industry turns a dream into business. They did the impossible and lost themselves in the process. "We were part of a machine," Louis said. "And when you're in it, you don't notice when you stop breathing." And yet, despite the spin, the pressure, the game, the machine couldn't destroy the one thing that started it all, the music. The very thing from which everything grew. From day one, One Direction lived under a spotlight. Cameras followed them everywhere. Airports, hotels, streets, cafes. They couldn't walk 10 steps without a scream or a flash. Fans tracked every move. But the real hunt didn't begin with fans. It began with the press. At first, the media adored them. Britain's golden boys, heart thieves, the new Beatles. The higher the rise, the louder the fall. Tabloids realized One Direction didn't just sell music, they sold stories. And they printed anything that brought clicks. Harry Styles and 7 girls in a month. Zayn and Louis fall out. Liam can't handle fame. Every day, a new headline. True or not, didn't matter. Only attention did. In 2013, Harry was at the height of his popularity. His love life became a national pastime. Anyone he stood next to in public instantly became Harry's new flame. From pop stars to waitresses, no one was spared. He said once, "I barely meet someone and we're married on a magazine cover. It is a last thing." The blazed fang, paparazzi camped at airports, fans slept outside hotels, cars were chased through city streets. Some fans even hid in hotel ventilation shafts to see them. Sometimes it felt like their lives weren't theirs. Zayn felt it as an illness. He hated the attention, hid under a hood. The more he closed off, the harder the press tried to pry him open, writing about his anxiety, his bad attitude, inventing conflicts. When he left the band, they tore him to shreds. Traitor, smashed a million dreams, buckled under pressure. No one asked how he felt. No one tried to understand. Then it was Louis' turn. After his mother's death, tabloids wouldn't leave him alone. Some wrote about his grief, others about a new romance, others about how he had let himself go. He said, "Even when someone close to you dies, they don't leave you alone. It's a prison of photographers." And then there was Larry Stylinson, a theory that swept the world. Millions were certain Harry and Louis were secretly together. The internet exploded. Forums, fanfics, videos, frame-by-frame analysis of glances and gestures. Everything became proof. Louis begged for it to stop. "It's destroying my life." But the wave wouldn't break. Even when his child was born, many called it staged. Harry never confirmed or denied. He simply said, "People believe what they want. I don't owe anyone an explanation of who I am." And that only fueled the fire. Liam suffered different headlines, scandals, alcohol, nerves. After his death, tabloids flooded the web with photos, fabrications, insinuations. Fans defended him. But once again, the media turned tragedy into content. Even Niall, the kindest, the most normal, wasn't spared. When he bought a London house, paparazzi staked out his gate for weeks. "I just want a coffee without it being news," he said. Over time, it became clear this wasn't just fandom. It was a cult, a world where every word, glance, and gesture is a headline, where a person stops being a person and becomes a projection of other people's expectations. "They took our faces and turned them into characters," Zayn said. "But we're alive." The media corroded their friendship, fed rumors, invented fights to keep the flame burning. Sometimes the storytellers started believing their own stories. They couldn't tell truth from headline. In a later conversation, Harry said, "Fame isn't light, it's a spotlight, and it doesn't warm you, it burns." By decade's end, each had learned to live with it in his own way. Harry stopped reading the news. Louis ignored everything that wasn't music. Niall shut the door on his private life. Zayn vanished from public view. Liam kept fighting, and his fight ended too soon. Watch the old footage, smiling faces, jokes, fans, and it's hard to believe that behind it lay constant pain. One Direction became victims of their own success. Millions loved them, and those same millions shattered their peace. And yet, despite the lies and the hunt, they survived. Not as perfect idols as people who endured the impossible. "Sometimes the love of fans can be louder than the music," Niall said. And that's not always good. The camera fades. Only flashbulbs remain blinking slower and slower, until there is only silence. In a world lit by spotlights, privacy stops being private. For One Direction, love became not a feeling, but a threat. Managers discouraged relationships because it distracts the fans. Contracts included clauses about maintaining a romantic image, and any display of intimacy off stage was a risk. But you can't muzzle a heartbeat with a memo. While cameras captured smiles, real life roared backstage full of jealousy, passion, and quiet. They were young, drowning in attention, always together day after day, night after night. 5 people bound not only by music, but by understanding each other better than anyone else. Among fans, the Larry Stylinson theory took root. Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson, 2 people between whom it seemed something sparked. It wasn't invented from thin air in the early years, they were inseparable. Interviews, jokes, glances, casual touches, too natural to be just friendship. When fans started cutting videos, writing stories, hunting for evidence, that connection became a cult. For Harry and Louis, it was a nightmare. Whatever their relationship truly was, it buckled under the pressure. They were told not to sit together in interviews, not to share dressing rooms, not even to hug on camera. "It destroyed our friendship," Louis said. "People turned us into what we weren't." And yet, when you watch the old clips, the laughter, Harry's winks, that charged silence between them, you can't shake the feeling there was more than friendship. Harry was open, light, free, unafraid to be himself. Louis, the opposite. More fire, more fear. Their contrasts created tension. When they were separated by design, a wall grew between them. Behind that wall remains a story no one will ever tell. Harry later said, "Some things can't be explained, because in explaining them, they lose their meaning." Love wasn't confined to fan theories. Each of them searched for it, and each lost it, at least once. Zayn's relationship with Perry Edwards of Little Mix was loud and public. The media turned their engagement into a show, their split into catastrophe. Her heart was broken in front of everyone. "It was love," he said later. The world made it a spectacle. He closed himself off forever after that. Liam and Cheryl, 2 from different worlds. She, a legend of British pop. He, a boy who'd grown up on her songs. Their pairing seemed impossible, and yet it was real. They had a child, but couldn't withstand the pressure. The press dissected every step, and the relationship collapsed. "We just wanted to be a family," Liam said. "They wouldn't let us." Niall kept to the sidelines. He loved, but stayed quiet. No public romances, no scandals. "If I love," he said, "that's mine. I don't share it with the world." He preserved what the others lost the right to silence. And Harry was a riddle. Affairs with models, actors, singers, all under a microscope, with no one any closer to knowing who he really was. He flirted with image, played with gender, broke stereotypes. For some, a rebel. For others, a genius. "I don't have to wear labels," he said. Love is love. His relationship with Olivia Wilde triggered an explosion. She was harassed and hated simply for being by his side. Harry stood quietly beside her, defending with a look, not words. When they split, he said only, "Some stories end softly." In their world, love always walked hand in hand with pain. They couldn't just love. Every emotion became content. Every feeling a headline. Every touch a story. They lived in a society where even love had to pass through management, and perhaps that's what made them so human. Sometimes love is chaos, someone says in a voiceover. Maybe only in chaos does something real appear. The camera rolls old footage, Harry and Lewis in the dressing room. Laughter, an embrace. Liam with his son. Niall on an empty stage. Zayn staring out a window. And it seems like all of it is the same person in different bodies. Because behind the fame, behind the masks, behind the millions, they were all searching for the same thing to be loved. When, in 2016, One Direction announced a hiatus, no one understood it was an ending, not even them. Fans hoped they'd return. Managers called it temporary. But after 6 sleepless years with no private life, freedom finally arrived, and it was scarier than fame. Harry left first not physically, but inwardly. He felt music differently and refused to repeat the past. He changed his image, his team, his surroundings, his sound. His debut album became a sensation, a blend of nostalgic rock and poetry, mature and honest. Sign of the Times sounded like a love letter to life and a farewell to a part of it. He became the emblem of a new era, free, enigmatic, artful. Films, stadiums, a Grammy. The higher he rose, the more it felt like the others couldn't breathe at that altitude. Liam tried to prove he could stand alone. LP1 was commercial but cold. Radio formulas, collaborations, hits without a heartbeat. I just wanted to be heard, he said. And I ended up losing myself. Fatigue, addiction, sleepless nights, the industry forgives nothing. He wasn't ready for the silence after the applause. And it was the silence that broke him. Niall chose the quiet path. No races, no records. Music that sounded like life. No pose, no polish, only warmth. Flicker and Heartbreak Weather albums without slogans, full of human breath. I don't need first place, he said. I need honesty. People listened with a special tenderness. He stayed himself, real, simple, grounded. Louis couldn't just come back. His pain wouldn't let him move quickly. A mother lost, a sister gone. These are wounds that don't heal. Walls became confession rather than career. If it weren't for music, I wouldn't have survived, he said. He stopped seeking fame and started seeking meaning. His shows became gatherings for people who had also suffered. Not a hero, just a man who kept walking. Zayn built his own world, beautiful, melancholic, almost sealed off. Mind of Mine was a revelation. Tender R&B, Eastern colors, lyrics of longing and light. He proved he could do it without them. Success brought not joy, but solitude. Canceled shows, rare appearances. I wanted to be free, he said. But freedom turned out to be too loud. The world wouldn't let them rest. The industry demanded hits. The press compared. Fans argued over who was best. Harry, genius. Zayn, traitor. Louis, invisible. Liam, problem. Niall, sweet but simple. They didn't fight, but a silence grew between them. No calls, no meetings, only the occasional message. A brief word of support. Everyone knew the friendship belonged to the past. Liam's death shattered that silence. Each reacted in his own way. Niall wrote simply, "He was kind." Harry posted a black square. Lewis stayed quiet for days, then said, "It hurts." "He was my brother." And Zayn said nothing until weeks later, when he whispered on a live stream, "He was part of my life, and that won't change." Something shifted after that. Fans returned to old songs, launched flash mobs, shared videos of the five together. Their faces on screen felt alive again. People understood. One Direction was not just a band. It was an era of youth, friendship, dreams, loss, and the search for self. Harry stood on stage in Los Angeles and sang Night Changes. No choreography, no spectacle, just a guitar. The crowd sang as if time had swung back. In another city, Louis listened and mouthed the same line. Niall smiled at his screen. Zayn just watched. 5 roads, 5 lives, 1 trace. They're no longer together, and that's the point. Legends don't live on stages. They live in memory. Each of them went his own way. And somehow, all roads still lead back to where it began. Years passed. The noise faded. Fans grew up. Cities changed, but the songs still play. Somewhere, someone turns on Story of My Life, and for a second, time returns. Those 5 voices that once filled the world now live in memories, old videos, millions of hearts. The story of One Direction didn't die. It just grew quieter. After Liam's death, a wave of nostalgia swept the internet so strong it felt like the air itself vibrated with memory. People wrote letters again, rewatched interviews, searched for the smiles and glances where it all began. Under the hashtags number Thank You Liam and number Forever 1D, millions of messages appeared. You taught us to dream. We grew up with you. Others simply left a heart under an old photo. Wordless. Louis returned to the stage after months. The fire was gone, tenderness remained. He spoke to the audience like friends. Between songs, he said, "Everything we did together, and I'm grateful." His voice sounded deeper, gentler, as if he had finally accepted it all, the pain, the fame, the losses, and turned them into light. Niall recorded a new album and, for the first time, dedicated a song to the 5 without names, without direct lines, but every fan understood. "We walked the same road," he sang, "but found our light in different places. Not a goodbye in grief, a goodbye full of love." Zayn still lived in the shadows, but one day he posted a photo, a guitar engraved with 1D. No caption, just a heart emoji. It was enough to set the internet alight. The connection lived, even unspoken. In Rome, someone in the crowd shouted, "Do you miss One Direction?" Harry smiled, paused, and said softly, "Every day." The roar that followed wasn't applause, it was forgiveness. In recent documentary footage, they all look older, calmer. No makeup, no filters, no myth, just people who've lived too much to pretend. Harry steady, almost philosophical. Louis thoughtful, kind-eyed. Niall, the same boy, laughing at himself. Zayn quiet, a little sad, at peace. And Liam on the screen, smiling, alive, forever young. Today, One Direction is not a band. It's a memory, an era that taught millions that simple dreams can be real. They began as boys with shaking voices on the X Factor and became the voice of a generation. They may never share a stage again, but the story remains. Legends don't die, they turn into songs. And when the world hears, "If I could fly, I'd be coming right back home to you," it feels as if they're here once more. 5 voices, 5 journeys, 1 trace. They started together, went through everything, and will remain together in memory. One Direction. Not a band, not a brand. A story written with a heartbeat. Wherever they are now, wherever their names are spoken, they'll always be part of us. Forever.